Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Eudaimonia podcast. Edwina Murphy-Droomer is my name, and the anticipation of pushing record for this podcast has been, it's been bubbling away in my consciousness, in my psyche to be honest, for months. I remember at the end of last year, I posted on my Facebook page that a series, the Eudaimonia podcast and a series called Real Life Fairy Tales was coming. And so I'm guessing now that's probably 4 or 5 months in, really feeling like I'm on the verge of this body of work coming forward, but then never feeling quite ready. And with my birthday approaching, my 54th birthday approaching in just a few weeks, and everything that's going on astrologically for those that follow that line of understanding or fascination, this is a really extraordinary time in history. And it feels like there is this great push, this pressure to be a voice in the world, and not just my voice, but more and more women to be a voice of feminine wisdom in the world. And so for the Eudaimonia podcast and the work that I'm doing inside my community and with my clients and with this podcast is really about learning to think differently. It is, in the simplest terms, about learning a new language. You know, our lives are built on what we think and what we speak and what we do. And probably the most common reason that women come to me for support is because there is a feeling that they know that there is more for them. There is more to life. There is more meaning. You know, what's the reason why we do the things we do? What's the reason I'm here? What is my life purpose? And there is a great desire to do something that takes us forward towards this satisfaction that comes with more, whatever that more is. And the longer I've been doing this work, and it's over a decade now, the longer I've been doing this work, the more I have come to understand that the more is a search for more meaning, not more things, not more doing, but more meaning. And a different understanding of the thoughts that we have, the words that we speak, and the actions that we take. So the essence of what I want to share in this podcast and the conversations that are going to come is going to be really learning the language of the right hemisphere of our brain. We have all grown up in a world, and I say all in very general terms. There are those that have had the blessings of a different experience, but the majority of us have grown up in a world that is very left brain dominant. Now, in general terms, we think about this as masculine and feminine. So the left brain is all about logic and structures. It's about institutionalized thinking. So we go to school and we learn to regurgitate information that we're told. We take on the beliefs of people in books and teachers and their interpretations of things. We might go to church and take on the interpretations of whatever religion our family has, is part of. And then we go into university and there's more sort of taking on the beliefs, the knowledge, the ideas of other people. this is, very prevalent as well it's every institution. So my background, for those of you that are only just meeting me now, was in naturopathy and functional nutrition. So in the sphere of health, and that has become a massive institution as well, with pharmaceutical companies and the ways that doctors are trained. And it stems back to the demonization of women, the demonization of, witches, women that worked with herbs to heal, or foods, or birthed babies without doctors present, or like anything that was deemed a little bit woo-woo or outside the realms of institutionalized trainings. And of course, in those days, only men were allowed to go to university. So, it was anybody that deemed themselves knowledgeable about something had to prove their intellect with a piece of paper and a signature. And so we look at this in every area now, whether it's in governmental bodies or in health or in education or, it's religion. There's been this overarching dogma, domination, arrogance that has come from institutionalized learning. That is where expertise lies, and it's taken away the connection to our innate intelligence, our intuition. So when we come into the world as a brand new baby, pure in every way, we come with intelligence. It is intelligence that comes through our senses. So be that through sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and intuition. And there are the seeds of this intelligence, and then our experience of life allows these seeds of intelligence to grow. And so the first time we taste different things, our intelligence about what tastes good and how the food that we've tasted and eaten makes us feel, the sounds that bring us joy, the sounds that jar, the voices that resonate with truth, and the voices that our intuition says, I don't know that that's true. And then with that intuition, we say, why? And that's one of the first places in our lives where we get shut down, where our intuition is overridden by somebody else's belief or logic. And so we go off to school, and who we know ourselves to be starts to become either validated or undermined. And so many of us get to this point and start to take on the beliefs of other people and trust that belief as truth over our own knowing of truth. And so the disconnection begins. So what I want to do with this first introductory podcast is tell you my own real life fairy tale. The story, and I will begin this story at 13. There are two ways of thinking about ages and numbers. And symbols are one of the great, numerology and symbols and archetypes are the language of the right hemisphere of our brain, our imagination. This is the feminine hemisphere of our brains, and every human on earth has a masculine and feminine hemisphere. But I want to start, there's there, and we'll talk a lot more about numbers as I go forward, but there are feminine cycles and masculine cycles. And we've long known about the 7-year cycles in our lives. I first learnt about this through my children, my 4 children, going to Steiner School. So I didn't learn about it until I was into my, where am I, like 40s, I guess, 30s, late 30s. And so 7, 14, 21, 28. So if you look at your life through these 7-year cycles, you'll see where significant things have happened around these points. And then the feminine cycle is 13. So it's very interesting when I talk about maps of becoming, which encompasses, where there are all this body of work. In maps of becoming, I encourage my community to map this out. Look at what was going on in your life when you were 13 and then 26 and so on, and 7, 14, 21 and so on. And you will start to see how these initiations, how these thresholds in your life have created your very own real life fairy tale. So this is where I want to begin my story. So at 13, right at the end of my 13th year, I began boarding school. I went to, I was born in Canberra in the ACT here in Australia, and at some point along the way, the school that my dad went to, which was Geelong Grammar School, a fancy boarding school here in Australia, became co-ed. And he was very keen for us to go to the same school that he went to. And so we moved from Canberra in the ACT to Geelong. And for the first, from grade 4 to the end of year 8, I was living at home and going to school. And then in year 9 at Geelong Grammar, there's a school called Timbertop where you go off into the mountains for a year. And many schools do this, many private schools do this for year 9 because they know that it's a pivotal year of disruption. And the more physically active and distracted children are at that age, the better. The more time they've got to fill up their own time, the more likely they are to make choices that are not so great. So I, until this point, had been incredibly confident and self-assured. I had, I would even go so far as to say I was one of the most popular girls in school. I had a best friend and we were absolutely inseparable. And her family lived in New York, so she was a boarder at that stage when I was a day kid. And when, we had, weekends that she would come to us and spend time with my family. And then when her family came over for end of term breaks, I would go and stay with her family. They had a house here as well. And so we were incredibly close. And I imagined that we would be BFFs forever. Forever is always, such a fabulous concept when you're a child, and it just feels like this movie that's going to unfold as you want it to unfold. So I was very excited to start boarding school because I would get to live with my bestie and live with all my friends from school. And so I arrived, and on day 1, to the best of my memory, my best friend would not speak to me. It became abundantly clear from the first hour of being away at boarding school, miles from my family, miles from safety of, the cocoon of a family home, that my connection to my safe tribe and my connection to my identity of who I was suddenly utterly destroyed. And there was something about that experience that created such a powerful rupture in my life that I was never the same again. And in fairy tales, the way that I teach fairy tales and look at fairy tales is that we have cycles in our lives, events in our lives, thresholds in our lives that follow a pattern. And every fairy tale is the same, whether they're traditional fairy tales or real life fairy tales. And that is the cycles of rupture, retreat, return, and rise. And we can link this in with the seasons in the world around us. So rupture is the autumn. Rupture is when things fall away, when things die, when life looks like it's becoming barren. There's this sudden change that is so obvious in the world around us. And then we move into retreat, which is winter. And this is the time where we go in and work out, it might be grief. It might be just a time in darkness, in stillness, where we reconnect to who we are and what we want next. And then there's the rise, which is spring. If you think of the first, buds coming back out of the earth, and, it's this return into the world, which is equally full of trial and error. And then we have the rise, which is summer, which is celebration. And so this experience, and I'll talk a lot more about this as we move forward, but this experience at 13, at the end of my 13th year, the beginning of my 14th year, was, for want of a better word, catastrophic. So if we think about it in terms of tarot, for those of you that understand tarot, and I want to just perhaps introduce here that the ways that I have learned this right brain language and understanding archetypes and symbols has been through the gene keys, through tarot, and through fairy tales. And so I'm going to be bringing in these three elements, and you don't have to know anything about any of them to come on this journey with me, because I'm just going to be dropping little bits and introducing you to little bits as we go along from my perspective. And so you can think of them as like little seeds that I'm planting. And when you nourish these seeds with awareness, which happens as the conversations continue and as you start your own contemplations, then the seeds will start to grow, and your wisdom around each of these little seeds will grow as well. So this experience of rupture has three elements in it that are very beautifully linked to tarot. And the three cards from the major arcana that I put inside this particular experience is the death card. Now, the death card is transformation, and it's very tied to autumn. So transformation comes with shedding parts of our identity, shedding people, shedding ideas, shedding beliefs, shedding understandings, all the things that we get to let go of in order to connect to something new, to connect to a deeper wisdom, to connect to the next evolution of who we're here to become. So it's not a fear, not a card to fear. None of these cards are bad. None of these cards get to be feared. They actually get to be revered as extraordinary experiences that are necessary in order for the more that we yearn for to arrive. So there was death, and then there is the devil card. Now, the devil card is the way we think. It is the way other people think. It is the thoughts we take on and the thoughts that we have. So how we think about a situation either lifts us up and pulls us forward, or holds us back and slowly sucks the life force out of us. So that's the devil card. And then the Tower card is a really interesting card. And all of these I'm going into in more detail in the Eudaimonia library, where you can find, insights into all of these archetypes which live in all of our lives. And the Tower card is the rebirth card. So it's a life before and a life after experience. So for any woman that has given birth, who has gone through the pain, the life altering experience of life-altering experience of giving birth, labor and giving birth. This is a Tower experience. It doesn't have to be something that is sad. It can be something that leads to incredible gifts and celebration. In fact, it always is something that leads to a gift and a celebration through the perspective of life happening for us, not to us. So through that vein, this experience of my whole world falling apart when I arrived at boarding school, because it wasn't only my best friend that turned her back on me, it was all the people that I had felt were going to forever be in my corner suddenly weren't. And I was alone. I couldn't go home. There was no safe sanctuary. I had to sit in what was the ashes of my identity and who I knew myself to be in the world. And I rebuilt myself from that place, from the beliefs and the feedback of everybody around me, not from my own knowing of who I was. And I think this is the journey of many, many teenagers. And we can carry that belief about who we are into our adult lives. And for many people, we live with that for the rest of our lives. But one of the reasons why I have these conversations is so that we can shine a light on this and start to dismantle it, so you can connect to the knowing of who you are and why you're here and what you want, and the life that you were born to live. So that experience, whilst catastrophically painful, ended up being one of the greatest gifts of my life. But it took many years for me to discover that. And so I'm going to leap forward. And I'm going to leap forward because when that was year 9, 14, and I left school, at the end of year 12, I was 17, just prior to my 18th birthday. And the girl who launched herself into the world, that experience of launching myself into womanhood, I had a very strong belief that I wasn't good enough in any way, shape, or form. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't sporty enough. I wasn't musical enough. I wasn't popular enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't thin enough. I just wasn't, like, there was nothing in my belief about myself that I was equipped to create the life I was born for. So I was launched into womanhood waiting for somebody to rescue me, waiting, hoping, wishing, praying that a prince would arrive, that pretty woman moment, or the sleeping beauty moment, or whatever the moment was in my mind, the Rapunzel moment, that somebody was going to rescue me and take care of me. My mother never worked, and my mother's friends never worked. And so I grew up in an environment where women looked after, raised the children and looked after the home and did voluntary work and were, active members of the community, but they didn't work. And that's what my dad did. And he was very successful and took care of my mom and took care of myself and my two sisters. And so that's kind of what I imagined was going to happen. But as happens when you have such low self-esteem, I found that I was simply grateful when anybody showed me attention. And rather than believing that I could be in a relationship with somebody that would pull me up and forward, I felt that I needed to say yes to the person that was going to look after me because I couldn't do it for myself. And even as I say this, it's like I'm not articulating it in a way that I want to articulate it, but I'm going to keep going. I met my first husband through an introduction from a mutual friend. And at the time, my confidence came through alcohol. And so there was a lot of drinking and there was a lot of going out, and we were quite nocturnal and doing all the fun things. I was 25 when we met, and I'd worked in real estate for many years in reception and office management and done different things. But I knew that I had a different path, and that different path came from meeting and having a session with a naturopath. And it was the first experience in my life when I'd sat down in front of somebody who I felt genuinely cared, which is a really interesting thing to think about. But for anybody that's been to a naturopath, rather than going to a doctor where you might be rushed in and out in 10 minutes, a naturopath will sit with you for an hour and really listen and ask questions and get to know your lifestyle and all the different pieces. And to have that experience of being truly heard, being truly listened to, is a very novel experience for most of us. And I think if you take a moment to think about that for yourself, the last time somebody gave you their undivided attention, most of us are so dying to be heard that there's a lot of talking that happens, but not a great deal of listening. And so to be in front of somebody that was so interested and invested in my well-being was life-changing. And because of that experience, I decided that I wanted to become a naturopath. And so that was my first foray into connecting to the truth of who I wanted to be in the world. that was my first experience of being in front of somebody that felt like a genuine role model. I want to be like her. And so, with the support of my family, I began studying naturopathy. And it was during that time that I met my first husband. And so, yes, there was studying going on, and I was still working in real estate, but there was still a lot of insecurity. And so Friday, Saturday, Sunday night was, often Thursday, Friday, Saturday night was often going out and clubbing and drinking. And that was, there was still this desire to meet my Prince Charming. And so through a girlfriend of mine, I met my first husband on a weekend trip away. And he was incredibly charismatic, tall, strong, the picture of the knight in shining armor. And as we started to date, and as we started to get to know each other, there were so many things that just ticked all those boxes. There wasn't any. He was very, very clever, very intelligent, and nothing he couldn't fix or make or do. His family had a beautiful property, and he could ride horses, and he had that country background, and our conversations were fabulous. And he was big and strong, tall and muscles and like all the things. And I just felt wrapped up and safe when I was with him. And if I think back now, I know there were so many red flags. And the things that you overlook when you don't want to see them, when you want something to be the way you want it to be, you tune out the things that you don't want to see. We all do this. We all shape our reality. I have a saying that is, whatever you focus on expands. And so if your desire is to see what you want to see, then that's the things that you will find. And the things that you don't want to see, you can tuck away and pretend they don't exist. And so there is no fault in this story. There is only the experience of understanding and wisdom in hindsight. And just as he caused me a whole lot of pain, I have no doubt whatsoever that I created a whole lot of pain for him. A year after we met, we got pregnant with my eldest son, our eldest son, who's now 26. And a year after that, we got married. We had 3 children in 3.5 years. And then our 4th child arrived 4 years after that. And when I was 36 and our youngest child was 5 months old, the wheels fell off. And my first husband packed a bag and walked away. That was my second experience of life-altering rupture. And at the time, the grief and the feeling of being a victim of life again, and the helplessness and all the things made me believe that life was just unfair. Life was cruel. And there is a fabulous quote that has been attributed to Einstein that is and something along the lines of whether one of the most important decisions you will ever make is whether you believe we live in a hostile or friendly universe. And at that moment, again, I believed it was a hostile universe. But that moment, that death, the devil, the tower moment, the life-changing experience of becoming overnight a soul care single parent to 4 children aged 8, 6, 4 and 5 months old, with no job and no belief that I was capable of building the life for us that I wanted, ended up being, again, one of the greatest gifts of my life. It was the experience of growing up. So if we think about this in terms of well-known fairy tales, it was the Cinderella moment when she literally finds herself in the ashes of her life. And slowly but surely from that moment, I believe, was the building of who I am today. So in terms of human design, I'm a 3-5 manifesting generator. So for those of you that don't know anything about human design, the line 3 learns from lived experience. So school never made sense to me, and academia never made sense to me. Even with my naturopathic studies, which I graduated with high distinctions and distinctions as somebody that couldn't do science or maths or anything like that at school. But what I was very good at was learning through life experience. And so life has delivered me many experiences, moments of rupture. And from those moments of rupture, the rise is always extraordinary. And it is in those experiences of reconnecting to my knowing, reconnecting to who I am, to what I want, and my intuition, my vision, and the next vision is what I bring to the world now. So from that experience, I ended up, we had a little farm at that stage in a place called Ravenswood, just outside of Bendigo in Victoria. And over a year, with the help of friends, I sold that, and we moved and got a little seaside beach house in a place called Point Road Night in Anglesey. And it had no insulation and cracks everywhere, and the kitchen was always full of ants, but it was right on the beach. And that was the year of retreat. That was a year of just really reconnecting to what I wanted next. It was a time for us to find our feet again, because the year of getting the farm ready to sell, and it was just, it felt like living in a washing machine or a tumble dryer. It was just really reacting to everything that was in front of me without the breath to respond, without time to really think about what's next. So the year in this beachside house that was hot in summer and freezing in winter, and really became a beautiful cocoon where I reconnected to what's next. And about a year later, a flower farm came up for sale at a place called Wurtabullock, and I'd looked at other places, but the minute I walked in the door of this house, I just knew. It was that intuitive knowing. And in those days, I didn't even know what intuition was. I had no connection to this sort of language. It was just the knowing. And we put in an offer, and it was much lower than the asking price of the property. And there were 1,000 reasons why it was an illogical decision. It was, 9 acres and a flower farm. There was about 100 roses just in the private garden. And it was a good half an hour out of town. And, I was a single mother with 4 children, and this was going to be a huge undertaking. It made no logical sense, but it was just like, this is what I want. I knew that we needed to be in the country. I knew that there was something here that was pure, just perfection for us, and it was. I can still picture exactly where I was. I was driving when the phone rang, and I can picture where I pulled over and answered the phone because I could see it was the real estate agent, that they'd accepted my offer. And just knowing that this place was going to be ours. This was going to be our sanctuary where I raised my beautiful babies. And it was pure perfection. It was pure perfection. I can feel the emotion and the tears rise when I think about the gift that period was in our lives. And so this was the return. This was the return. But all throughout this, this time, the pervasive belief of not enough continued, despite all the things that I was achieving. I can't pinpoint exactly when it was, but I imagine that it was possibly 2 or 3 years after we'd been living in this house. And I'd been running this flower farm and bringing this rose garden back to life. And we had, I will share photos of this in the Eudaimonia Library and Substack. But at some point, and if I forget, please feel free to nudge me and remind me to do it. But I had this beautiful, rose garden with green lawn, and my children were just deliciously feral. All our clothes came from the op shop, and they barely wore shoes until they started school, and they, ran and played in amongst the flowers. We had proteas and leucadendrons, and their games were, building fairy houses with prunings and with flowers and with stones and things that they found in the environment. And we collected all our own water, and our heating was only came from wood that we chopped for the fire. And I made all of our food from scratch, whether it was bread and pasta, and we had a huge veggie garden and an orchard, and it was just this dream existence. And when I look at it now and I hear myself telling the story, I can see it for what it was. But when I was in it, when I was in the life, my beliefs had taught me to focus on all the things that weren't quite good enough yet. So I could see the weeds that needed pulling, and the house that needed to be cleaner and to have nicer furniture, and the work that needed doing on the farm, and I could see those things. And so this feeling of not enough continued to get fed, because what you focus on expands. And then I had this one moment this pivotal moment. And photography has long been a love of mine. And I remember sitting on the veranda watching my children run around on this expanse of green lawn naked with sprinklers going, full of joy and vitality and health, and they had each other, and there was some grand imaginative game going on in their minds, and the glee and the bliss, the blue sky, the flowers, the children. And I was taking photos, and I just remember having a what the bleep moment. I created this. I made this happen. This is the life that I've built, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And when I think about the amount of time I wasted with thoughts that continued to undermine my power, my creativity, my self-trust, my self-love, my ability to experience the goodness, the truth, and the beauty of our life, it breaks my heart. And it is this that I believe is my legacy. It is this that I believe is my work in the world, is to support women to reconnect to the truth, to the goodness, and to the beauty in their own lives, to fall in love with their own lives, to see the beauty in the rupture, in the retreat, in the return and the rise, to connect to their knowing. Because when we connect to our knowing, we connect to truth. Our beliefs are the thoughts in our mind, and they are more often than not beliefs that we've collected from people around us. Beliefs get to be siphoned through a sieve of inquiry, but our knowing gets to be trusted as truth. And this is one of the most life-changing understandings that we could ever have. And there is something in here that we get to pass on to children. And this comes from right brain intelligence, not from left brain logic. And the tools are stories, real life stories, real life fairy tales, traditional fairy tales. And when I say traditional fairy tales, I mean not Disney fairy tales. Gene keys give powerful language and understanding for this intelligence. And tarot is a powerful tool as well. I'll give you one example, because I was actually talking to the women in the Illuminarium, which is a mastermind, a 12-month mastermind that I run, about the wobble that I still have when I say God. So there is a fabulous quote by Carl Jung, and an interviewer asked him, "Do you believe in God?" And Carl Jung said, "I don't believe, I know." And I was sharing this, and I was saying, because of my experience with religion and my experience with truth, I still have this wobble when I say God. But I do believe that When we talk about God, Mother Nature, the universe, we're all actually talking to the same thing. So when I talk about Mother Nature, Mother Earth, there's no wobble. When I talk about Father Sun or Father Sky, there's no wobble. So you've got to find that language for yourself. There's no right or wrong. This extraordinary higher intelligence that is life, spirit, the creator, the divine, the soul of the world. It's not sitting back with its arms crossed going, well, you called me the wrong name. I'm not talking to you. So find the language that resonates for you. But when I was sitting on the fence again this morning about recording this first episode, my mind was full of all the beliefs of I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. I don't know what I want to say yet. Like it's not ready yet. All the things that is the devil thought is the stuff that holds us back. When I was thinking about that, I was like, okay, so let me pull out a tarot card. Let me pull a card. And I said, universe, tell me what is the message that I get to share with the world today? What is my contribution to the story of life on earth today? And I want to share it with you because you can't make this stuff up. The card I pulled was from a beautiful deck called The Seasons of Witches. And it's by Lorraine Anderson. And I believe she's going to do a different set for each season. And I am just so in love with this deck. I love it, love it, love it, love it. So you can use the traditional Rider Waite Smith deck, or anyway, this is the one that I used today. So the card I pulled is the Initiate of Winter Swords. And if you're not familiar with tarot, swords is the air sign. So it's all the thoughts, yeah? So let me read it to you. This is what it said. A young maiden walks through the winter forest with a basket in hand. She's supposed to be off to the market, but something catches her eye. Little sparks of light begin to erupt in the trees, and she whips her head around in surprise, her curiosity getting the better of her. She loves to discover things, and when she looks closely, she finds fairies and other magical things hidden in the trees. So off she goes to investigate. She wears lightning jewelry, a symbol of her rich mind and constant desire for enlightenment. The Initiate of Winter Swords, traditionally named the Page of Swords, is the most raw and natural representation of the mind. This card indicates a curious person with an almost insatiable desire to learn and understand. So that's me, and that's who this conversation is for. They aren't content with shallow answers or to follow dogma blindly, and they're always bursting with new ideas. Their mental openness provides fertile ground to make connections others often fail to see. In a reading, this card stimulates new ways to communicate, new forms of thinking, and new ways to learn. It guides you to explore and discover different ways to know and express yourself. It also encourages you to speak up, as receiving this card suggests you have an unusual but highly valuable perspective to share. So for you, those of you that are listening to the audio only version of this, I've shown the card, and I'll perhaps share a photo of it in my Substack Eudaimonia library so you can see. But for those that just are looking for a beautiful deck, I do I love this one. I don't have many. I've got a fairy tale deck. I've got a traditional Rider Waite Smith tarot deck, and I've got this one. But the message was clear. The message was clear. And this is the conversation that I'm going to be having in the Eudaimonia podcast. And this is who this podcast is going to be for. I have never been good at small talk. And my desire to really uncover the beauty of life, the beauty in humanity, the truth of who we are, the truth of why we're here, and the truth of what our contribution is to the world. And the goodness is what is for the highest good of all. And for us to be intimately connected with our own story, our own real life fairy tale, to be connected to the truth of who we are, to be connected to what we're here to do and our contribution to the world. What is for the highest good of all is for us to take responsibility for being the happiest, healthiest, most prosperous versions of ourselves. And as long as we are carrying the beliefs of other people, that we should this and should that, and continue to should all over ourselves, as long as we continue to carry some form of belief that we're not good enough, as long as we continue to carry shame about aspects of our journey through life, as long as we continue that, humanity will continue to suffer in unnecessary ways. And our responsibility as women is to reclaim the beauty of our intuition, of our imagination, of our understanding of archetypes and symbols and the power of numbers. There's a very good reason, I believe, why many women struggle with maths, because it's taught logically. But not sure what happened. Something just cut out momentarily then. There are the Fibonacci numbers. And if you go and look this up on Google, you will see the patterns of the Fibonacci and how things in nature are created through these patterns of numbers that are just so beautiful, that are so breathtakingly awe-inspiring. So what I want to do, I'm feeling like the place to wrap up this story is there has been another rupture in my life, and it is a rupture that many women have experienced that comes in a way that is expected but also entirely unexpected. So in September of 2025, last year, my youngest child turned 18. And I had, at that point, expected him to be at home for another 2 years because he was doing an apprenticeship. And he made a decision that he wanted to put a hold on his apprenticeship and get his license and follow in his sister's footsteps, in his siblings' footsteps, in taking himself out into the most remote parts of Australia and to start working on a station. All of my children have been very nomadic and have the essence of their country beginnings wrapped well and truly into their psyches. So being in remote spaces, being in the country, being around animals has been the calling card for all of them. And my youngest answered his call to adventure and took off in October. And I had had momentary experiences of empty nest. He left home for a year when he was in year 9 to go and live with his dad, and came back a year later. And so I had him for the next couple of years. But then I knew there was going to be this transition phase, this initiation, this threshold into the next chapter of my life. But I was unprepared for how much rupture there was, how much I needed to let go of, how much new identity building happened and is continuing to happen. And so there has been a rupture, and there has been a retreat that has been months and months. It began last year. I think there was even a sense of it all of last year. My intuition, my knowing must have been knowing that this was coming sooner than my beliefs were ready to accept. And so the rupture was happening, and there's been this retreat and not ready to return to the online space with what I want to teach now until now. And so this is the return. This is the beginning of what's coming next. This is the beginning of my next phase, the phase beyond the mother. I'm going to be a grandmother for my first grandchild is arriving in the next few weeks. And so there is this evolution that's happening. And I would love for you to be with me on this journey. And if you're in a place in your life where there is this yearning for more, where there is this sense of what life before no longer fits, and what is next to come, what is the more, what is the deeper, what is the meaning, then I hope you'll be with me on this journey. I do work one-on-one work with women for 12 months. I've been doing this since 2018, and it is something that is such incredibly rich, meaningful, and special work. It's the work that I was born for, and it is the work that gets me out of bed every morning. Because to support women to reconnect to their knowing, to their truth, is my gift. It's why I'm here. And it's the longing, it's the yearning that brings such deep meaning to my life. So if that is something that you ever want to talk to me about, then please reach out to me directly, and we'll make a time to hop on a call and have a chat and look at how this might work for you. So I'm going to wrap this up here. And inside the Eudaimonia library, over the coming days, weeks, months, possibly years, you will find recordings of different fairy tales. I have more women's real life fairy tales coming. The first 2 have already been scheduled, and I'm very excited to share those with you as they arrive. But for now, that's it from me. All right, beautiful souls. Thank you for being with me. So much love. And bye for now.